Welcome once again to Cherish Ephesians 6:4, and we are reading Confessions. This is Book 4. For 9 years, from when I was 19 to 28, we lived a life of deception, indulging in various desires. We were openly drawn to what they call liberal sciences, and secretly we followed a religion that was falsely named. We were proud in one place, superstitious in another, and vain everywhere. We chased after the emptiness of public praise, even to the point of seeking applause in theaters, winning poetry prizes, competing for grass crowns, indulging in the silliness of shows, and giving in to uncontrolled desires. In contrast, we also sought to cleanse ourselves from these impurities by providing food to those who were called elect and holy. We believed that they, in the workshop of their stomachs, would create angels and gods for us, who would then cleanse us. I followed and practiced these things with my friends who were deceived by me and with me. Let the arrogant mock me, and those who have not been humbled and knocked down by you, my God. But I will continue to confess my own shame to you, praising you. Please allow me, I beg you, and give me the grace to recall the mistakes of my past and to offer you a sacrifice of gratitude. What am I without you but a guide to my own downfall? Or even at my best, what am I but a baby nursing on the milk you provide and feeding on you, the food that never perishes? But really, what kind of a person is anyone, considering we are all just human? Let the strong and powerful laugh at us, but let us, the poor and needy, confess to you. During that time, I was teaching rhetoric, and driven by greed, I was selling eloquence. But you know, Lord, that I preferred to teach honest students as they are considered, and I taught them tricks without any deceit. These tricks were not meant to harm innocent people, but sometimes they were used to protect the guilty. You, God, saw me from afar, struggling on this slippery path, and amidst all the confusion, I still managed to show some signs of loyalty. This was evident in the way I guided those who were attracted to vanities and lies, and I was their companion in this. During those years, I had a woman in my life. We weren't married in the traditional sense, but we were together due to a reckless passion that lacked understanding. However, I was faithful to her and only her. Through this relationship, I learned the difference between the self-control exercised in marriage for the sake of having children and the agreement of a lustful relationship where children are born against their parents' wishes. But once these children are born, they inspire love. I also remember that when I decided to compete for a theater prize, a sorcerer asked me what I'd give him to ensure my win. But I despised such dark practices and told him, even if the prize was made of everlasting gold, I wouldn't let a single fly be killed for my sake. He intended to kill some animals as part of his rituals, hoping to gain favor from evil spirits on my behalf. But I turned down this wicked proposal, not because of my pure love for you, God, as I didn't know how to love you then. I couldn't imagine anything beyond physical beauty. And isn't a soul that yearns for such illusions betraying you, placing trust in unreal things and feeding the wind? Even so, I did not want any sacrifices made to evil spirits for me, as I was already sacrificing myself to them through my superstition. Because what does feeding the wind mean, if not pleasing and amusing these spirits by losing my way? So those frauds that people call mathematicians, I had no problem consulting them because they didn't seem to be making any sacrifices or praying to any spirits for their predictions. However, true Christianity and genuine piety totally reject and condemn this practice. It's a good thing to admit to you and say, have mercy on me, heal my soul because I've sinned against you. We shouldn't misuse your mercy as an excuse to sin, but remember the words of the Lord, look, you're healed, don't sin anymore, or something worse might happen to you. All this sound advice they try to undermine, saying, the reason you sin was predestined in heaven, or Venus, Saturn, or Mars made you do it. As if humans made of flesh and blood and full of arrogant corruption could be blameless, while the Creator and ruler of heaven and the stars should take the blame. And who is he but our God, the very essence and source of righteousness, who gives each person what they deserve? And you won't reject a heart that's broken and remorseful. Back in the day, there was this really smart guy who was a pro at medicine. He was famous for his skills and had even crowned me with a victory wreath for overcoming my mental struggles. But he wasn't the one who cured me. That was all you, because you're the one who helps the humble and opposes the proud. But did you abandon me through this old man or decide not to heal my soul? As I got to know him better, I was really drawn to his words. Even though he spoke simply, his words were full of life and passion. When he found out that I was into astrology books, he advised me like a father would to throw them away. He told me not to waste my time and effort, which could be better spent on useful things, on such nonsense. He said that when he was young, he had studied astrology to make a living out of it. He could have easily mastered it since he understood Hippocrates, but he gave it up and chose medicine instead. He did this because he realized that astrology was completely false, and being an honest man, he didn't want to earn his living by deceiving people. But you, he said, you have your public speaking skills to rely on for a living. You're into astrology because you want to be, not because you have to be. So you should trust me on this, especially since I worked so hard to master astrology to the point of making a living out of it. When I asked him how astrology could predict so many true things, he gave me the best answer he could. He said it was all due to chance, which is spread throughout everything. For example, if you randomly open a book of poetry, you might find a verse that surprisingly fits your current situation. So it's not surprising if, by some higher instinct, an answer comes from the human soul, unaware of what's happening inside it. This answer, given by chance and not by skill, matches the situation and actions of the person asking. So you passed on a lot of information to me through him, which I stored in my memory to reflect on later. But at that time, neither he nor my dear friend Nebridius, a uniquely good and devout young man who scoffed at all forms of fortune-telling, could convince me to abandon it. The credibility of the authors influenced me more, and I hadn't yet found solid evidence, like I was looking for, to definitely prove that the accurate predictions made by those consulted were just coincidences, not the work of astrologers. Back when I first started teaching rhetoric in my hometown, I became friends with a guy who was just like me. We were the same age, and both of us were just starting to come into our own. We'd grown up together, going to the same school and playing together, but at that time, our friendship wasn't as deep as it would later become. True friendship, after all, can only exist when it's bonded by the love that the Holy Spirit pours into our hearts. Still, our friendship was incredibly sweet, made even sweeter by our shared interests. Unfortunately, I led him away from the true faith that he hadn't fully grasped as a young man, and into the same superstitious and harmful beliefs that my mother was so upset about. We were both lost, and I couldn't imagine my life without him. But you, God, were always there, ready to bring us back to you in your most mysterious ways. You're both a God of vengeance and a source of mercy. In a shocking turn of events, you took my friend from this life after we'd been close for only a year. His loss was a blow to me, more painful than anything else I'd experienced in my life. Who can express all the praises for you which they've personally experienced? What did you do then, my God, and how unfathomable are your judgments? For a long time he was seriously ill with a fever, lying unconscious as if on the brink of death. Everyone had given up hope for his recovery, so he was baptized without his knowledge. At that time I didn't pay much attention, assuming that his soul would retain more of what I had taught him, rather than what was done to his unconscious body. But it turned out quite differently. He recovered and regained his strength. As soon as I could talk to him, and I did as soon as he was able to because I never left his side and we were very dependent on each other, I tried to joke with him about the baptism he had received while he was unconscious and unaware. But now he understood what had happened. However, he recoiled from me as if I were an enemy, and with surprising and sudden assertiveness, He asked me to stop talking about it if I wanted to remain his friend. I was completely taken aback and decided to suppress my feelings until he was fully recovered and strong enough for me to discuss it with him as I intended. But he was taken away from my madness so that he could be preserved for my comfort with you. A few days later, when I was not there, he was struck down by the fever again and passed away. I was completely heartbroken. Everything I saw reminded me of death. My homeland became unbearable, and my father's house was filled with strange sadness. Everything I had shared with him now that he was gone turned into a painful reminder. I looked for him everywhere, but he was nowhere to be found. I started to despise all places because they didn't have him, and they couldn't tell me he is coming like they used to when he was alive and away. I was a mystery to myself. I questioned my soul, asking why it was so sad and why it was causing me so much distress. But it had no answers for me. And even when I told myself to trust in God, my soul didn't listen, and rightly so. Because the dear friend I had lost, a human, was more real and better than the illusion I was told to trust in. The only thing that brought me comfort were my tears, as they replaced my friend in the deepest part of my affections. Now, Lord, those times have passed, and time has healed my wounds. Can I learn from you, who are the truth, and bring the ear of my heart close to your mouth so you can tell me why weeping is so comforting to those in misery? Even though you are everywhere, have you pushed our misery far away from you? You remain constant, but we're thrown around by various trials. Yet if we didn't cry out to you, we'd have no hope left. So where does this sweet relief come from amidst the bitterness of life, from groaning tears, sighs, and complaints? Is it the hope that you're listening that brings comfort? This is true for prayer, as it's longing to get closer to you. But it's also true for the grief of losing something and the sorrow that overwhelmed me back then. Because I didn't hope for him to come back to life, nor did my tears express this wish. I just cried and mourned. I was miserable and had lost my joy. Or is crying actually a bitter thing, and due to our disgust for the things we once enjoyed, does it please us when we reject them? Why am I even asking you about this? Now is not the time for questioning, but for confessing to you. I was miserable, and so is anyone who's attached to temporary things. When you lose them, you're torn apart, and you realize how miserable you were even before you lost them. That's how it was for me. I cried my eyes out, and my only comfort was in my sorrow. I was miserable, and yet I clung to that miserable life more than I did to my friend. Even though I wanted to change it, I was more reluctant to let go of it than I was to let go of him. I'm not even sure if I would have given it up for him. Like those stories, real or not, about Pylades or Orestes, who would have gladly died for each other or together, because living without each other was worse than death. But for some reason, I felt the opposite. I hated living, and I was scared of dying. I guess the more I loved him, the more I hated and feared death, which had taken him from me. I thought it would soon take everyone since it had taken him. That's how I remember it. Look at my heart, God. Look and see me inside. I remember it well, my hope, you who cleanse me from the impurity of such feelings, guiding my eyes toward you and freeing me from this trap. I was amazed that others who were also mortal could go on living when the person I loved, who I thought would never die, was dead. And I was even more amazed that I, who was like a second self to him, could go on living after he died. Someone once said about their friend, "You're half of my soul." I felt that my soul and his soul were one soul in two bodies. That's why my life was a nightmare to me, because I didn't want to live as a half a person. And maybe that's why I was scared to die, because I didn't want the person I loved so much to die completely. Oh, what madness it was, not knowing how to love people like a normal person. What a fool I was, unable to patiently endure the human condition. I was restless, sighing, crying, and completely distraught. I couldn't find peace or advice anywhere. I was carrying around a broken and bleeding soul, unable to bear it, yet I couldn't find a place to lay it down. Not in peaceful woods, not in games or music, not in fragrant places, not in fancy feasts, not in the pleasures of the bed or the couch, and not even in books or poetry could I find rest. Everything seemed horrible, even the light itself. Everything that wasn't what I wanted it to be was repulsive and hateful, except for crying and tears. Those were the only things that gave me a bit of relief. But when I pulled away from them, a huge burden of misery weighed me down. I should have turned to you, Lord, to lighten my load. I knew that. But I couldn't or wouldn't. Especially since when I thought of you, you didn't seem real or substantial to me. You weren't yourself but a mere illusion, and my mistake was my God. If I tried to unload my burden onto it, it would slip through the void and come crashing back down on me. I was stuck in a miserable place where I couldn't be myself, nor could I escape from it. Where could my heart run from my own heart? Where could I run from myself? Where could I go without following myself? And yet I ran away from my homeland. That way, my eyes wouldn't have to look for him where they used to be seeing him. And so I left the Gast and came to Carthage. Time doesn't stand still, nor does it pass without impact. It shapes our minds in strange ways through our senses. Days came and went, bringing new thoughts and memories into my mind. Gradually, these thoughts and experiences began to replace my old pleasures, which I returned to as my sorrow faded. However, this didn't mean the end of my troubles, just the beginning of new ones. My previous grief had cut so deep because I had invested my love in someone mortal, as if they would never die. The comfort and company of my friends whom I loved in your place helped me recover. But this was a grand illusion, a long-lasting lie. This lie which tantalized our souls was only making us more corrupt. But no matter how many of my friends passed away, this lie didn't die for me. There were other things about my friends that captivated me more: our conversations and jokes, our mutual support, our shared reading of delightful books, our playful or serious moments, our occasional disagreements that never led to hard feelings, and our frequent arguments. We taught each other, learned from each other, missed each other when apart, and rejoiced at each other's return. These expressions of love, conveyed through words, looks, and countless charming gestures, served to bond us more closely. They melted our individual souls into one. This is what we love in friends. It's such a strong love that we feel guilty if we don't reciprocate the love of someone who loves us, or if we don't love someone who loves us. We expect nothing from them except signs of their love. This is why we grieve so deeply when a friend dies, why we're plunged into sorrow, our hearts soaked in tears, all joy turning to sadness. When a friend dies, it feels like a part of us dies too. Blessed is the person who loves you, God, and who loves their friends and enemies because of you. This person doesn't lose anyone they care about, because everyone they care about is loved through you, and you can't be lost. And who is this but our God, the God who made heaven and earth, and fills them because by filling them he created them? No one loses you, God, unless they choose to leave you. And if someone leaves you, where can they go to or run? Except from you in a state of satisfaction to you in a state of dissatisfaction. Because wherever they go, they'll find your law in their own punishment. And your law is truth, and you are truth. Turn to us, O God of all. Show us your face, and we will be healed. No matter where a person's soul turns, if it's not towards you, it's stuck in sorrows, even if it's stuck on beautiful things. And yet these things outside of you and the soul wouldn't exist if they didn't come from you. They rise and set, and by rising they start to exist. They grow to reach perfection, and once perfected, they age and fade, and not all age, but all fade. So when they rise and start to exist, the faster they grow to be, the quicker they rush not to be. This is their law. You've given them this much because they are parts of things that don't exist all at once, but by passing away and succeeding, they together complete the universe of which they are parts. And just like our speech is completed by signs in making a sound, but this isn't perfected unless one word passes away when it has sounded its part so another may follow. Let my soul praise you, O God, creator of all. But let my soul not be stuck to these things with the glue of love, through the senses of the body. For they go where they were meant to go, so they might not be, and they tear her with destructive desires because she longs to be, yet loves to rest in what she loves. But in these things there is no place for rest. They don't stay, they flee. And who can follow them with the senses of the flesh? Indeed, who can grasp them when they are nearby? For the sense of the flesh is slow, because it is the sense of the flesh, and that's its limit. It's enough for what it was made for, but it is not enough to hold things running their course from their appointed starting place to the appointed end. For in your word, by which they are created, they hear their decree from here to there. Don't be foolish, my soul, and don't let the noise of your foolishness make you deaf to your own heart. Listen up. The word itself is calling you to return. And there's a place of unshakable rest where love is never abandoned as long as it doesn't abandon itself. Look, these things are passing away to be replaced by others, and so this lower universe is completed by all of its parts. But am I going anywhere, says the Word of God? Make that your home. Trust in it with everything you have, my soul, especially now that you are tired of pointless things. Trust in the truth, whatever you have from the truth, and you won't lose anything. Your decay will bloom again, and all your diseases will be healed, and your mortal parts will be reshaped and renewed and gathered around you. They won't take you where they're going, but they'll stay with you and last forever before God, who lasts and stays forever. Why then let yourself be led astray by your physical desires? Instead, turn around and follow your true self. Whatever you perceive through your senses is only part of the whole, the entirety of which you're not aware. Yet these parts still bring you joy. If your senses were capable of comprehending the whole, and not just a part of it as a form of punishment, you would wish for everything that exists now to disappear so that the whole could please you more. When we speak, you hear us through the same physical senses, yet you do not want the words to linger, but to move on, so that others can come and you can understand the whole message. So whenever something is made up of many parts that don't exist together, the whole would be more pleasing than its individual parts, if all could be perceived at once. But far superior to all these is the one who created everything, our God. He doesn't pass away, because nothing can replace him. If you're captivated by physical beauty, give thanks to God for it, but remember to direct your love toward the creator of that beauty. If you don't, you might end up displeasing him by focusing too much on the things that please you. If you're drawn to people's souls, love them in God. Souls can change, but they're firmly grounded in him. Without him, they'd simply fade away. So love them in God and bring as many souls as you can to him. Tell them, let's love him, let's love him. He created all these things and he's not far away. He didn't just create everything and leave, but everything is part of him and exists in him. Look, he is right there where truth is loved. He is in our hearts even though we often stray from him. Come back to your heart, you who have gone astray, and stick to your Creator. Stand with him and you'll stand firm. Rest in him and you'll find peace. Why are you wandering on rough paths? Where are you going? The goodness you love comes from him. It's good and enjoyable because of him, and it's only right that it turns bitter if you love it more than him. So why do you keep choosing these difficult and exhausting paths? You won't find peace where you're looking. You're searching for a blessed life in a world full of death. It's not there. How can there be a blessed life where life itself does not exist? Our true essence, our life, came down to us, took on our mortality, and defeated it with the power of his own life. He called out to us, urging us to return to him, to that hidden place from which he first came to us. He first entered into the Virgin's womb, where he united with our human nature, our mortal flesh, so that it wouldn't be forever mortal. Then, like a groom leaving his room, he emerged filled with joy and ready to fulfill his purpose. He didn't hesitate, but ran towards us, calling out to us through his words, actions, death, life, descent, and ascension. He urged us to return to him. He left our sight so that we could turn inward to our hearts and find him there. He left, but he's still here. He didn't stay with us for long, but he never really left us. He went back to where he had never really left because he is the creator of the world. He was in the world, and he came into this world to save sinners. My soul admits to being one of them, and he heals it because it has sinned against him. Oh, you people, why are you so slow to understand? Even now, after the source of life has come down to you, won't you rise and live? But where are you going when you elevate yourselves and speak against the heavens? You need to come down in order to rise, and rise toward God. You've fallen by rising against him. Tell them that this is so, that they may weep in the valley of their tears, and then you can lead them up to God. You speak these words to them out of his Spirit, if you're speaking at all, fueled by the fire of love. Back then I didn't understand these things. I was drawn to superficial beauty, sinking deeper into it. I asked my friends, don't we all love beauty? So what exactly is beauty? What makes us attracted to the things we love? Because if they weren't beautiful or graceful, they wouldn't be able to captivate us. I noticed that there was a certain beauty in physical forms coming from their completeness and another kind of beauty from their appropriate and mutual compatibility, like a body part with its hole or a shoe with a foot, and so on. These thoughts bubbled up from the deepest part of my heart, and I penned down on the fair and fit maybe 2 or 3 books. You know, Lord, because I don't have them anymore. They've somehow slipped away from me. What moved me, Lord, to dedicate these books to Hippo, a renowned speaker from Rome? I didn't know him personally, but I admired him for his reputed knowledge and the few words of his that I had heard and liked. But what made me like him even more was the fact that others admired him too. They were amazed that a Syrian, initially educated in Greek eloquence, could later become an exceptional Latin speaker and a scholar in philosophy. He was praised, and even without meeting him, he was loved. Does this love seep into the listener's heart from the words of the one praising him? Not exactly. But one person's love can ignite love in another. That's why a person who is praised is loved, especially when the one praising him is believed to be doing so sincerely, that is, when someone who loves him praises him. I used to love people based on other people's opinions, not yours, my God, in whom no one is deceived. But why shouldn't I love them for their qualities like those of a famous race car driver or a popular actor known far and wide by the general public? I love them in a different, more sincere way, the way I wanted to be loved myself. I didn't want to be loved or admired like actors, even though I admired and loved them. I'd rather be unknown than known in that way. I'd even prefer to be hated than loved like that. Where do these different kinds of love come from within a single soul? Why do I love in others what I would reject in myself if I didn't hate it? It doesn't make sense that just because someone loves a good race car, even though they wouldn't want to be that car, that same could be said about an actor, who is also a human like us. Do I love in a person what I hate to be in myself as a human? Humans are a complex, a deep mystery. You, Lord, have counted every hair on our heads, and not one falls without your knowledge. Yet counting the hairs on a person's head is easier than understanding their emotions and their stirrings in the heart. That speaker was the kind I admired and aspired to be like. I was misguided by my own inflated pride, and I was swayed by every passing trend, but you were still guiding me, even if it was in a subtle way. How do I know this? How can I confidently admit to you that I loved him more for the praise he received from others than for his actual merits? Because if he hadn't been praised, and if those same people had criticized him, I wouldn't have been so drawn to him. The facts wouldn't have changed, nor would he have, only the opinions of the people sharing the story. Look at how weak the soul is when it's not grounded in truth. It's easily swayed by the opinions of others, tossed around like a leaf in the wind, its vision clouded and unable to see the truth. And yet the truth is right in front of us. It was really important to me that this man knew about my work and my efforts. If he approved, I'd feel even more motivated. But if he disapproved, my fragile heart, not yet filled with your strength, would have been hurt. Still, I took great pleasure in the fair and fit that I wrote to him about. I enjoyed reflecting on it and admiring it, even if no one else did. I still hadn't figured out how this important issue was resolved in your wisdom, O Almighty, the one who performs miracles. My mind was focused on physical forms. I defined fair as something that is beautiful in itself, and fit as something whose beauty is in relation to something else, using my physical examples to support this. I tried to understand the nature of the mind, but my misconceptions about spiritual things prevented me from seeing the truth. However, the power of truth managed to break through me. It shifted my focus from non-physical substances to shapes, colors, and large sizes. Since I couldn't see these in the mind, I thought I couldn't see my mind at all. I loved peace when it came to virtues and hated discord when it came to vices. In the former, I saw unity, and in the latter, I saw a kind of division. In that unity, I imagined the rational soul, the nature of truth, and the ultimate good. But in that division, I sadly imagined some unknown substance of irrational life and the nature of the ultimate evil, which I thought was not only a substance but also a real life, and yet not derived from you, my God, from whom all things come. I referred to the first as a monad, as if it were a genderless soul, and the latter as a duad, representing anger and violent actions and lust and immoral behavior. I didn't really know what I was talking about. I hadn't realized or learned that evil is not a substance, and our soul is not the ultimate and unchangeable good. When acts of violence occur, it's usually because our emotions, which drive our actions, have become corrupted, acting arrogantly and uncontrollably. Similarly, lusts arise when the part of our soul that craves physical pleasures is left unchecked. In the same way, errors and false beliefs can taint our interactions if our rational soul is corrupted. This was the case with me, as I didn't realize that our rational soul needs to be illuminated by another light in order to grasp the truth, since it isn't inherently truthful. But you, Lord my God, will light my way. You will dispel my darkness. We have all received from your abundance, for you are the true light that illuminates every person who comes into this world. In you there is no inconsistency or change. I kept pushing toward you, but you pushed me away, letting me experience death because you resist the proud. And what could be more arrogant than my bizarre belief that I could naturally be what you are? I knew I was prone to change. My very desire to become wiser, to improve from a worse state, was proof of this. Yet I preferred to imagine you as changeable, and myself as unchanging like you. So you pushed me away, resisting my stubborn vanity. I imagined physical forms, blamed my physical self, and like a fleeting wind I did not return to you. Instead, I kept moving towards things that didn't exist in you, me, or the physical world. These things weren't created by your truth, but by my vanity, using physical elements. I used to ask your faithful followers, my fellow citizens, from whom I was unknowingly estranged, why does the soul God created make mistakes? But I didn't want to be asked, why does God make mistakes? I insisted that your unchanging essence was forced to make mistakes, rather than admitting that my changeable essence had willingly gone astray and was now, as a punishment, lost in error. Back when I was around 26 or 27 years old, I wrote those books. I was filled with worldly fantasies echoing in the depths of my heart. I tried to tune into your divine melody, contemplating the fair and fit. I yearned to listen to you, to feel immense joy at the sound of the bridegroom's voice, but I couldn't. My own mistakes were pulling me away, and my pride was dragging me down into a deep pit. You didn't allow me to experience joy and happiness, because I hadn't yet learned humility. So what did I gain then when, barely 20 years old, I got my hands on a book by Aristotle called The 10 Categories? I was so excited about this book, considering it something grand and divine, especially since my rhetoric teacher in Carthage and other so-called scholars often mentioned it with such pride. I managed to read and understand it all by myself. When I discussed it with others who claimed they barely understood it, even with the help of skilled tutors, who would not only explain it to me verbally but also illustrated concepts in the sand, they couldn't tell me anything more than what I had already figured out on my own. The book seemed to explain very clearly about the entities like man and their attributes, such as the shape of a man, what it looks like, his height, how tall he is, his relationships, who his brother is or where he is located, or when he was born, or whether he's standing or sitting, or if he's wearing shoes or carrying weapons, or if he's doing something or having something done to him, and all the countless things that could be classified under these 9 categories, of which I've given few examples, or under the main category of substance. What good did all this do to me when it actually held me back? I tried to understand your incredible and unchanging unity, O my God, as if it fell under those 10 categories I had imagined. I thought of you as you were subject to your own greatness or beauty, as if they existed in you like they do in physical bodies. But you are your own greatness and beauty. A physical body isn't great or beautiful just because it's a body. Even if it were less great or beautiful, it would still be a body. But what I thought about you was false, not true. These were the lies my misery created, not the reality of your blessedness. You commanded, and it happened to me, that life would be hard and full of challenges, and that I would have to work hard for my sustenance. So what did I gain from all the books I managed to get my hands on about the so-called liberal arts? I, a pathetic slave to my own pathetic desires, read and understood them all by myself. I found joy in them, but I had no idea where all the truth and certainty in them came from. I was like a person standing with their back to the light, only seeing the things illuminated by it, but not the source of the light itself. My face, which I used to perceive the illuminated things, wasn't illuminated itself. You know, Lord my God, that I understood everything written about rhetoric, logic, geometry, music, and arithmetic without much difficulty or any teacher. This was because of the speed of understanding and sharpness of discernment that are gifts from you. But I didn't use these gifts to honor you. So these skills didn't serve me, but rather led to my downfall. I was trying to keep a good portion of my abilities for myself, not preserving my strength for you. Instead, I strayed far from you, wasting my abilities on meaningless pursuits. What was the point of having these great skills if I didn't use them for good? I didn't realize how hard it was for even the most dedicated and talented people to master these arts until I tried to teach them. It turned out that the person who could keep up with me, even a little, was the one who excelled the most. But what good did it do to me to imagine that you, Lord God, the embodiment of such truth, were a vast and radiant entity, and I was just a small part of that entity? Such a twisted thought. But that's how I was. I'm not ashamed, my God, to admit your mercies towards me and to call upon you. You didn't hesitate back then to admit my blasphemies to people and to speak out against you. What benefit did my quick wit in those sciences and all those complex books which I deciphered without any human guidance bring me, considering I made such a huge and sacrilegious mistake in the doctrine of piety? Or how did a slower wit hinder your little ones, since they didn't stray far from you, so that they could safely grow within the nest of your church, and nourish the wings of love with the food of a sound faith? O Lord our God, let us hope under the protection of your wings. Shield us and carry us. You will carry us both when we're young, and even when we're old. For our strength, when it comes from you, then it is strength. But when it is our own, it is our weakness. Our goodness always resides with you. When we turn away from it, we go astray. Let us now, O Lord, return so that we may not be overthrown, because our goodness lives with you without any decay, and you are that goodness. We don't need to fear that there won't be a place to return to because we fell from it. Even though we were absent, our home didn't fall. Your eternity. That is the end of Book 4. See you in the next one.